Well, welcome to the Coach Lifter for session number 5. This session is titled Coaching Your Group to Shepherd Another. In your role as a coach, your number one mission in this session is to be able to help them multiply their spiritual lives of both the leaders and their group over time. Now, this isn't overnight, this is over time, but it is God's clear call on all of our lives that one day we would spiritually reproduce our life into the life of another. Now, practically, what are some ways in which we can do this? I have to say first that one of the most inspirational stories for me came when we just simply cast this vision, and we didn't even have to get all that practical, to one guy named John. Okay? And John had a men's group. There was 5 guys in this men's group, and he just said, it's kind of God's deal, and this is what he wants to do. And so he rotated leadership naturally, and he empowered them to invite other people, and one thing led to another, and they went from 5 people to like 15 people, and 15 people to like 30 people. And then he started talking to his wife, saying, I don't know if we can do it all here. And so they decided to start in a second home right next door. And so someone went next door because one of the guys was in the group, and they went into the garage, and they added another 30 people over there, and they went across the street and they added another 30 people over there. This thing totally took over the cul-de-sac on this guy's street. There was 200 people that came from this one man's life, just simply casting the vision to be able to take Jesus serious about following me, and I will make you fishers of men, and to freely give that which you have freely received. Now, what can you do as a coach to help model for the rest of your new hosts or existing groups to help turn this vision that Jesus had into a reality? Number 1 is always start another group. You don't need to stay with it, but just start it. You start it, you stay with it for a little bit, and then you send them on. It's kind of like that old country western song. You got to love them, you got to leave them. Love them, launch them, and then ultimately leave them. But you will model for all the rest of your hosts how to do it. And you'll also gain greater conviction of the beauty and blessing of being able to be a part of something that is fresh and new at the neighborhood level, not trying to manage 5 groups or whatever. A lot of times what happens to poor coaches and community leaders is they end up getting that role, and then they don't lead a group anymore, or they don't even participate. But seek to at least start, be that catalyst to start another group once in a while by ultimately raising somebody else up. I'm doing this actually this next week with in our neighborhood, and I'm so excited about being able to do it, but I am not about to lead it. I already have 2 co-leaders in the thing, and we're hosting at somebody else's house because I don't want to have to clean my house up. I'm sure that you guys know the script. Okay, next is visit your groups at least a couple of times a year, especially at strategic times. One of the things that this one guy did as a coach is he kind of did what he kind of called the world tour. And he visited all of his groups. He had about 20 groups. He was kind of a leader of leaders, and he didn't have a bunch of coaches, so he just visited these 20 groups. But he would visit, on one night, he would visit 3-4 groups. Now, some of you don't even have that many groups, but choose to try to align them as much as possible and then kind of go into them. First thing you do is show up early, you pray. The second thing you do is you welcome everybody as they come in. The next thing you do is you ask how the leader's doing and try to take an opportunity to give them a little affirmation. The next thing you do is say, here's 1 or 2 things that I'd just like you to be praying for the church, or take a few prayer requests so that you can be praying for them, and then move on to the next house. But one of the other things you can do in that moment is to be able to cast vision for in a few weeks or in a few months or whenever it's going to happen, when the church does another campaign or does an alignment with the weekend services, is to say that your pastor is going to call on this group, which is a healthier group or is a group that's, could be a candidate, to all take a 6-week break and everyone go and start another group. Your chance is to cast vision directly to those groups. See, one group could end up starting 10 groups, and that could assimilate 100 people. In most churches, average church in America, that's 50% of the congregation, just by visiting one group. Please, this is a very strategic effort on your part as a coach. The next one is to fight inertia with focus. If you do not fight natural inertia, which is to head straight towards us 4 no more, us 7 all the way to heaven, or really it's just about fellowship, you will lose the battle. Because groups will naturally not want any input. They'll naturally be very happy just kind of doing their own thing, kind of getting a little independent, entrepreneurial. And if you aren't a part of that and establish that early on, it'll be real hard to engage in that. Later on, you really have to earn the right to be heard by just loving on them and leading them and then coming on in and delivering, everything from baked goods to sometimes just bringing in experiential opportunities like communion or foot washing or a prayer service or an affirmation of the leader or a group review or other kinds of things to give you credibility in that circle. The next thing you do is pray them into your circles. If you do not cast the vision for them to be praying, to ask who is it that they see that they would like to do life together with, all 10 in any given circle, it'll be hard for you to try to get them to go down that road. The last thing, or the last couple of things is if you could gather all the leaders together and all the members together in clusters of 3 to 5 groups, or all the leaders in a cluster of, a smaller one, and cast vision for them to be able to do ministry and mission broader than themselves, it gives great purpose to be able to try to have a huddle. And with the ensuing new training series that we'll have down the road, it'll give you a chance to have, frankly, an excuse to gather those that will gather to be able to do the training. And when you do, you'll find that sometimes some will be more teachable than others. But when they come, if you just turn that thing into a moment for them where you're loving on them and you're feeding them good food and you have a great time together, you'd be surprised what God will do. The last one is follow the pathway of life. It's really important for you just to simply recognize that all 30 or all 50 or all 500 or whatever you have, like one friend of mine, Butch Yellett, had almost 200 groups, 2,000 people under his care, and he was simply a bivocational 10-hour-a-week guy, one of the most ordinary guys in the church with gifts of leadership. But he was very reluctant, very unassuming, but he had tremendous organizational leadership gifts, but a huge heart of a shepherd. He just basically said, as he stood in front of the first circle of about 30 leaders when he first started and said, I'm just dreaming that we could reach our community for Christ, and if you're willing, we'd like to see some of your members in your group just kind of move from just being a follower of Christ to help serve it in your group and ultimately to shepherd a few others. That's just what God's call is on all of our lives. He almost said it just like that, and I'm watching him like amazed. What happened is his 25 groups went to over 200 because the guy was willing to step out in faith, cast a vision way over the front end of the bow, and God used it to no end. Any senior pastor would give their right arm for a person like this, but if you are a senior pastor or if you are that person, the partnership that you could create by just encouraging people to stay on the pathway, moving from seeker to student to servant to shepherd, is really the dream that Jesus had. And ultimately that thing continues on from shepherd to staff in a bivocational way. And it might be more full-time later, might even go into a senior pastor role, like so many of the friends that I saw come to Christ. Even in the first small group, there were 2 guys in that very first small group I was in that ended up becoming senior pastors. And one guy who ended up planting over 30, 40 churches, at least to this point, and he still continues to do the same to this day. And he was lost as a goose when I met him. I was a little further off myself, but you could see what God could do with the heart of a few faithful folks willing to commit themselves to a simple, focused ministry of the pathway that God has laid out for each of us. Okay, now, I say all this because I know this is a hard topic, and you as a coach are going to need to stay strong with this one. And so with that, I finish by just like the words that Joshua was given, to be strong and courageous, knowing that the Lord your God is with you.